It's a first of its kind recovery. A patient has fully recovered after being on ECMO for 62 days after he was tested positive for COVID. And now he's all set to get back home. And joining us now, Dr. Mohamed Rela at the Rela Hospital. Doctor, thank you very much for your time. What's the message from this success story, Doctor?
See, this is a very unusual situation. It's very few patients who go on ECMO, patients who suffer from COVID. Not even 1 in 100 would go on ECMO. Most patients will recover without even going to ICU, but this man was admitted to ICU, oxygen requirement was not adequate. He was put on a ventilator. Even with 100% oxygen on a ventilator, it was not possible to oxygenate him, and therefore he was put on an ECMO. And when patients go on an ECMO, there is a time limit, really. The lungs have to recover probably in a month or so. And if the lungs doesn't recover in a month, we generally put them on a waiting list for a lung transplant. Otherwise, they will not survive. And therefore, after a month on ECMO, he went on a waiting list for lung transplant and did not get a lung transplant in time. And to our surprise, even after 2 months on an ECMO, his lungs started to recover. And we were able to take him off ECMO. So it's an extremely unusual situation for somebody to survive after 2 months on an ECMO without a lung transplantation.
What made this possible?
I believe that we still don't understand the lung damage in COVID. It's a new disease. So how are we to know that patients, if you continue them on ECMO without lung transplant, a proportion of them will recover? And that's what we have demonstrated, that not all patients on ECMO will require a lung transplant. And if you carry on with it, there may be an opportunity for some patients to recover without lung transplant. So the achievement here is really 2 months on ECMO and recovery after 2 months on ECMO. Very few patients have been reported around the world. There's probably only one other case so far reported from the United States, where almost 5 months after ECMO the patients recovered. And here in India, we have seen this phenomenon that this patient has recovered 2 months after ECMO. And it's very, very unusual. Most patients won't make it. And to see that after such long ECMO and such severe damage, the lung is now actually recovering back to normal. He's on very little intermittent oxygen now.
So the lungs performance is back to normal now?
Back to normal, and I don't believe he will ever need a lung transplant.
Oh.
So he's actually getting back to recovery, and the COVID lung, which almost 100% was destroyed, is actually completely recovering back to normal now. That is an unbelievable situation.
As we prepare for the third wave, Doctor, how expensive is ECMO treatment, and how equipped are we in terms of providing this in all the hospitals?
Yeah. Now, I don't think every patient who's got severe COVID will need an ECMO. Most of them will recover after ventilation and tracheostomy. Very few are going to do. And the facility of ECMO is not available everywhere either. And the outcome of ECMO has also not been uniformly good everywhere. So my message to the major corporate hospital is that ECMO is an option in COVID damaged lung. And also there is a good possibility that these patients will recover after ECMO even without lung transplantation. And I think, I'm hoping that the third wave is not going to be like the second wave. I think everybody is hoping for many reasons, because a lot of people are now recovered from COVID, almost, and a huge proportion of them have been vaccinated. So if you hope that 60% of the population is either vaccinated or have recovered from COVID, then the severity of the illness is going to be not that high. And they're also saying it's going to be kids who are going to be affected. And we know from the first wave and the second wave that children are not so severely affected with COVID. There may be exceptions to this rule. So we hope that the requirement for ECMO or lung transplant will be much less in the third wave.
And give a sense of how much it would cost for a patient to be on.
ECMO is expensive. Almost, if you say 1 month of an ECMO in an ECMO might cost almost 30 lakhs to 40 lakhs. So we are talking about 2 months on an ECMO in ICU. ranging from 80 lakhs to 1 crore for this treatment. So it cannot be afforded by everyone. And I think at the end of the day, the number of patients who are going to require this treatment is going to be minuscule. It's going to be very small. And state support and other supports, NGO support may be required in exceptional patients. And because the number is so small, it's not going to be a huge burden even for the state.
Right. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time, and wish you all the best. In Chennai, with Mani Bharti, Sam Daniel, Find It TV.